3 years ago, I moved out of my childhood home, migrating next to a university, far enough so I can taste independence, close enough not to feel it. A necessity, not a decision, decades of insidious colonization efforts and foreign meddling not allowing for the ideal, for true individual stability. It's only my second week of college, and as I have found to be expected, the day greets me with blackened clouds and pouring rain. I've forgotten my umbrella, or maybe I've yet the forethought to buy one. The neighborhood I can now call my own is old. The distant sound of my country's music, the type my grandparents would play at full volume in the deep nights of New Year's Eve's booms around me. Shattering of my culture's far too casual, nearly broken version of the Spanish that we have been forced to make our own populates the alleys. Cracked streets and falling stop signs are a stubbornly usual obstacle in my morning commute, and as I pass the parked car that's taking up half of the allotted walking space, I am welcomed by the blaring grin of a sticker the owner had decided to paste on their windshield. That of a character miles divorced from me or my life or my people by distance. Monkey D. Luffy, the future pirate king, smiles at me. Continuing the trek, another car rushes past me, this one with a similar sticker. An angry, determined glare, that of Son Goku of Planet Vegeta, flies. Entering my first class of the day, I am sat beside a boy, likely Hispanic, like me, genes of our African forefathers dominant in his appearance, and dangling from one of his sides is a unique earring, a rectangular one bearing the iconography of the hunter's license of famed manga and anime, Hunter x Hunter. I eventually returned to my apartment, nothing of real note having happened in my day.
Sharon Pedro, if you see people walking around downtown LA this weekend dressed up as a cartoon character or a video game character, this is why.
30,000 people racing to get inside the Anime Expo. This is about to get crazy.
There's a lot happening here at Anime Corpus Christi. Cosplays, meet and greets, and tasty treats. But perhaps what's most special is such a niche event happening here in Corpus Christi.
A majority of the time, you have to go to either San Antonio or...
Japanese cartoons have thoroughly implanted themselves into Western culture in a way I'd harbor to guess nothing truly has before. Even the figures of modern Western mythology, like the superheroes we can't stop mindlessly going to the theaters to see, have long adopted the intricacies of their Eastern peers, even if subtly at times. Asian stylings and character designs are so vehemently mixed into our understanding of 2D art that even those as artistically bankrupt as to create computer programs to make art for them output something with the unmistakable wide eyes and thin lips of a stereotypical anime girl. That, in of itself, is far from a groundbreaking observation, conservatively minded art teachers across this side of the hemisphere having a good few years of shaming students for drawing like anime under their belts. Interesting conversations can and have been had about manga and anime's growing popularity across the world and its influence on the international mediums they inhabit, and I itch to continue them at some future time, but that day is not today. No, today I want to talk about something far more personal, or as personal as this disembodied presentation can allow. I want to talk about something that anime and manga has given us a very unique opportunity to study, of how cultures combine to mold and alter what was once culturally monogamous into something far different than what it was. How humans of different worldviews and living in vastly different social norms react to the same content, unchanged from its original intention. I want to talk about how anime and manga has become a million different things to a million different people, and what that means to its artistry. Perhaps I need to be a bit more accurate with what I want to talk about today, devoid of my flowery and pretentious language. Let's try this. When I ask you to imagine yourself an anime fan, it is likely that quickly something comes to mind, varying greatly in flattery. Perhaps your first thought was that of a long festering group of anonymous internet-obsessed dweebs who have long used Asian media as an escape from the Western world they have grown disenchanted by, recently repopularized by parodies poking fun at the, let's say, dubious aspects of Japanese life they idolize. Maybe you thought of your friend's boyfriend who's always watching some new, action-heavy and nearly incomprehensible collage of explosions and screaming every time you visit. Perhaps your mind first went to TikToks of teens dressed in impressive, if not gaudy, imitations of their favorite characters performing in quite the unique form of guerrilla theater. Or it's even likely you couldn't imagine anything in particular, finding the exercise antithesis to any actual analysis and also dumb and stupid. Ignoring all of you in the latter, it's those unique behavioral patterns and the culture in which they thrive that I wish to discuss. Shonen anime is very likely to be the most popular subsection of manga in the Western world, and also the type of anime I will be focusing on today as to finish this video before your date with that cute barista you're always talking about. Though it is interestingly not a genre description. Shonen, in its original meaning, is a demographic indicator, that demographic being preteen and teenage boys. Always the overachievers, shonen anime such as Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, My Hero Academia, and many more have broken out way beyond not only their country of origin, but their demographic cage as well. This has led to an influence and fandom varied and uniquely strange. All walks of life have had these at first shallow-seeming pieces speak to them. Universal appreciation, though not always do two people appreciate the same thing the same way. I want to talk first about the response to shonen anime that I have lived my entire life surrounded by. Shonen battle anime has long been a staple of Hispanic and Black communities in the Americas. Practically, this is no surprise. The growth of anime like Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon in the 90s thanks to Cartoon Network's Toonami block led to all youths in America getting their fill. And with the cheap distribution rights of Asian-born cartoons in Latin America, the poorer countries got an even bigger slice.
Llévalas con precaución, por favor, soldado Dodoria, porque parece ser que Vegeta también las quiere.
But what is it about these extravagant epics that is filling up huge stadiums in Mexico and El Salvador and creating fans out of superstars like Samuel Jackson and Megan Thee Stallion? Well, it's similar to the surface level discussion around anime as a concept, and that being the maturity of its subject matter. Long has anime been defended from naysayers who view it as nothing more than a cartoon, and cartoons as only being for kids, with the trusty blade that it's actually for adults. A rebuttal as surface level as the argument it's aimed at, this weapon points at the violence and bloodshed that shows like Dragon Ball flaunt as proof of its higher age range. Ironically, this is a caveat that would only really work on kids, the disrespect for child media clear in its delivery. It isn't as much that Naruto isn't for kids, because in a way, it is. It's that the customs of Japan and what they consider appropriate is much different than the US's. Still, this created a surge of immediate popularity from a group of teens looking to feel a bit more grown up, much like teens a few years before did with The Simpsons. Though it's in that comparison that the influx of African American and Hispanic fans makes more sense. The Simpsons, much like other edgier animated shows like Family Guy and South Park, are productions written from a particularly white perspective, and while not necessarily for white audiences exclusively, surely appeals more to white sensibilities. It's in this context that the more abstract life of Naruto Uzumaki, an underdog long discriminated against by his clan who develops the strength necessary to break from the systemic shackles placed on him since birth and defends those he cares about, until one day reaching the top of his society's hierarchy of power, appeals more to the continent's disenfranchised youth and eventually adults. This repeated underdog story structure and the adrenaline-pumping action has played a big role in the mass adoption from minority audiences. Anecdotally, I can speak also on how the subjective coolness of these series generate insane popularity in appearance-run cultures. Puerto Rico, my humble and appropriately disenfranchised home, has a long-standing culture of expression and art, where trends in style and music are ones often discussed and necessary to adopt. One where the ninja with sick wizard powers would catch on rather quickly. This adoption similarly works the other way around. Whether it be the amount of references to anime and manga and hip-hop and trap music, genres populated mostly by black artists, or the large amount of fan art of anime characters dressed in street clothes popularized by people of color, or even the comical amount of Hispanic establishments across America rocking a far too large Goku on the front. These communities have as much become part of the media as the media has become part of the community. This intersectionality has recently come to the forefront with popular anime One Piece hiding the phrase, "smoking that Big Mom pack," referring to the defeat of a major villain in the show, into the episode itself. The idiom originates, as far as I can tell, from the original saying, "smoking that op pack," which itself comes from Chicago drill rap and refers to the shooting or smoking of an enemy. This to say that the integration of anime as a medium in black culture has circled into the inclusion of black culture into the medium itself. More so, the iconography of these characters as powerful and badass figures abstracted of an identity to lash onto any community has granted heroes to a group of people in dire need of actual representation. Is Goku a Mexican icon? Not in any traditional sense, but in every way that matters, yes, he is. He is a character core to the culture of any young boy in the 90s tapping aimlessly through Canal 5, much as Ash Ketchum is a staple of consumerist Americana in the US. This isn't to say that these communities don't need actual fictional figures to call their own, and never will I say that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Naruto Uzumaki is in any way a replacement for Black Panther, but when all other shows and movies have heroes not made for you, it's nice to adopt those far more foreign characters made for an audience far away and easy to ignore. If your internet travels overlap with mine even a little, I send my condolences, and I imagine that you've heard a variation of the phrase, but can they beat Goku though? In of itself, this is a joke on how absurdly powerful Dragon Ball's main character has grown in his decades of serialization, but more so it's a dig at his fans' incessant need to prove that he is not only really strong, but the strongest. Stronger not only compared to the villains and heroes of his own universe, but stronger than any other character in any other fictional universe, multiverse, or whatever other verse lets us see more Spider-Man in the next movie. An ostensibly absurd thing to want to prove, since a fictional character is quite literally as powerful as their author wills them to be, and arguably as powerful as the audience wills themselves to perceive. But a thing that has caused metaphorical wars in an attempt to objectively confirm. The modern age's fountain of youth, if you will, the answer to who'd win in a fight between Goku and Superman. Such is the curse of the Power Scalers, a group of fans dedicated to measuring the strength of fictional characters using their accomplishments in canon to accurately compare them to other characters in fiction. Long has this trend existed, but boy has it hit its stride with shonen anime. Story discussions, plot synopsis, and theme analysis have long taken a backseat to inane discussions on whether Naruto's water magics would beat One Piece's fruit powers. Not to say that these conversations are completely non-compatible with further enjoyment of the art, but I will go on a limb that the internet did not decide that this was the topic where it would learn self-constraint, especially when these debates reach the same level of toxicity as an elementary school screaming fight. And it's this same philosophy that dictates many other aspects of fandom discussion. Smug assertions that Luffy is the greatest of all time that brings the undying wrath of someone with a different favorite character that has never even watched One Piece. This shouldn't be a surprising development. The internet is horrible and secretly everyone hates being on it. But even less surprising is why someone would genuinely feel so loyal towards these fictional characters. As established, these characters are much less characters but icons to many people, and much how you wouldn't insult Spider-Man in front of a scrawny white dude or Michael Jordan in front of a 50-year-old with a torn ACL, you wouldn't insult Luffy in front of someone who grew up with One Piece. That basketball comparison is especially poignant. Believe it or not, despite me spending the last eternity wasting your time with useless discussions about things that only kinda matter, I am a basketball fan. So bless your stars, I'm not wasting your time talking about the latest NBA playoff run. And something I've seen in my decades of online anime discourse and months of basketball discourse is that the two are nearly interchangeable. TikToks and Twitter posts of the newest One Piece manga chapters reading almost like absurdist parodies of ESPN's latest update on the Hornets' newest embarrassing roster mix-up. In this comparison, we learn that sports fans are just as nerdy and comically obsessed as any self-proclaimed weeb. But more importantly, we see how to a large subsection of shonen fandom, their favorite shows are more large-scale sporting events than stories being told. I don't mean to generalize, but there is a reason why sports anime make up a large sleuth of popular shonen franchises, and it's actually quite a genius reason. While hard to believe in a world so dominated by fantasy media and fandom, there was once a time not too long ago where a good portion of the population worried not of deep stories in fiction, but instead exclusively consumed the peak athleticism of the world's greatest ball throwers. A truth much easier to visualize when you imagine what it is that the stereotypical drunken dad is always watching. I don't know much about the accuracy of that stereotype. Last time I checked, beer is apparently for the gays and the girlies, but that original culture of media consumption is not a fully dead one. You're unlikely to find someone younger than 40 who only watches sports-related programming. However, you are likely to find someone who mostly watches sports-related programming, woefully ill-equipped to analyze and consume fiction and literature, failed by the education system who creates people who honestly think that the curtains are just blue. All this to say that the narratives and the dissections of such that come from the NBA and MLB are not those that would translate greatly into your Lord of the Rings. They're good stories of triumph and excitement, of shocking upsets and crippling chokes. Stories you'd retell to your children to prove that your era of sports was way better and everyone now are just a bunch of sissies. But they stand in staunch opposition to what the best fiction has to offer in meaning and real-life commentary.
And they're air-popped, not fried.
But that hype, that uncertainty in who's going to come out on top of your favorite team winning it all, it's hard to reproduce anywhere else. Unless you're an overworked comic artist in Japan. Then it comes to you as naturally as breathing. Shonen anime, a genre that reigns from a long line of sports manga, tend to share the hype-first story structures of the greatest underdog upsets. Stories of characters competing in an exaggerated version of combat sports where fights tend to be decided by the most skilled participant in usually rather fair parameters. Stories that span decades, where you grow with the world and the characters just like you would grow and develop with your hometown's football team. Dragon Ball is mostly tournaments, Bleach a collection of one-on-one fights, and One Piece revolves around the type of ranking systems and generational classifications sports fans eat up. It's no surprise that the fly trap would attract flies. The issue then forms when sports-like discussion begins to overshadow analysis of the actual show, where fans of certain teams begin to grow angry at their defeat. When certain characters are written in ways that contradict your all-time rankings, when your personal GOAT is not that strong at all. Would it make thematic sense if Kaido, the latest One Piece villain, won and defeated everyone? No, of course not. But for a certain group who studies these characters like they do real-life players, like a collection of stats and accomplishments, and came to the objective conclusion that the captain of the Beast Pirates is the absolute strongest, his fall is nothing short of unacceptable, impossible, clearly a side effect of outside interference. Who is the GOAT? The strongest, the best. The argument is as pointless as the Michael Jordan and LeBron James debate of real sports, and it devalues the actual story being told when you only view it through the lens of proving some obtuse argument. Goku defeating the latest god of the week should not be viewed as a reason to argue that he should be moved up in the all-time rankings, but instead as the climax of that story arc's months of build-up and character progression. Though that culture of sports hyperfandom is the one these shonen anime find themselves in. An impressive feat because even professional wrestling can't seem to be nearly as convincing in its sportsmanship as the show with ninja wizards. Anime fans are one of the unluckiest groups of people when it comes to public perception. Society tends to hate nerdy interest almost as much as they hate things teenage girls like, and anime has always found a way to remain in the underbelly of the true mainstream. Luckily, My Hero Academia took one for the team and decided to make an anime that teenage girls like. My Hero Academia is a manga series much in the same vein as all others mentioned before. In fact, it's so derivative of those previous works that it even uses the same names for some of the transformations as One Piece. The real difference between it and the Dragon Balls, Narutos, and Bleaches we've been talking about so far is its age. It's a much newer franchise, one that belongs to a much younger, yet not really all that contemporary community. Scrolling through my TikTok, I have seen quite a few videos of people reacting to old My Hero Academia fan videos, most of which involve a young girl imitating the already cartoonish English dub of the main leads, talking like how a teenager imagines a sexy person talks like. Out of context, these audios range from cringy to near parody, the lacking self-awareness and hormonal tendencies of these clips enough to morph the most stone-faced viewers. But in context, as I watched them with my many years of retrospect that I have, they are as usual as they come. Usual, but in a sickeningly interesting way. Perhaps I'm not explaining this well enough to invoke the absurdity of the situation to those unfamiliar with it. My Hero Academia is a shonen anime as tropey as they come, revolving around a group of teenagers that want to learn how to be superheroes. And it's this show, these irrationally muscular teens, that in a sudden burst in the late 2010s recreated the same feverish fanaticism and idolization that plagued Elvis Presley, the Beatles, One Direction, and currently BTS. This shonen anime, as unassuming as any other, became a boy band overnight. Now, full disclosure, I am not a teenage girl, so do take this part of the video with a grain of salt. I was queer and a teenager though, and to a non-0% of the population that's basically the same thing, so don't take that big a grain, I guess. Speaking of sexuality, that is a clear component in why this section of the fandom grew in this manner. As much like actual boy bands, the teenage characters of this show, particularly its male leads, are a safe way for the young audience to experiment with romance in a non-committal and safe way. I do not wish to make fun of that aspect or shame them for participating in it. It's such a repeatable phenomenon that I can't help but feel it unnecessary to even really comment on. But looking at other aspects of this subculture, follow-up questions do begin to form. Almost nothing about the details of this fandom, such as the almost fetishized gay fan pairings and polyamorous undertones, are unique to it. The exact same patterns found in K-pop stan culture and the One Direction craze that I grew up surrounded by. But still, there is a difference. Oftentimes, when a boy band's fans become too crazed for the public's palate, we ask ourselves if this is healthy for the artist to be a part of, if this obsession with their sexuality is in any way morally detrimental, if these stans truly care about their objects of affection as real people, or if they even enjoy their artistry. And I think that seeing the same cooing being directed at fictional teenagers instead of real celebrities, we find an answer. My Hero Academia is far from a bad show, and the fandom that now breeds in the wake of the previous one's ashes is one who analyzes the show like only a fan could. But what once stood, the manic adorers of these characters, they were not here lying in wait for the next shocking story event, or at least they weren't primarily. They liked the show. I'm sure such dedication wouldn't stem from pure attraction to a 2D drawing, but it's their attraction to those 2D drawings that kept them hooked. The show was secondary. The characters, what the fandom turned the characters into, had long taken over. And sure, I think that parasocial relationships, one between a human and their interpretation of a fictional character, is much better than that between a human and an asshole who speedruns Minecraft, but I still ache at the thought that for a certain audience, these shows are being left with so much meat on their bones because they were so much more interested in the skin. This is the case for a lot of shows. Other shonen like Haikyuu meeting similar fates, though at the end of the day, maybe art is meant for the viewer to use as they please, regardless of its original utility. With my rambling concluded, I want to go back to that original anecdote. Those stickers, those earrings, those icons that proved without a shadow of a doubt that someone's life work had affected someone they will never meet. What are those people's relationship with those shows? Does that parked car's owner identify with Luffy's battle for freedom to liberate himself from those who wish to push him down? Or does he just believe him to be the strongest in a fighting league with a lot of strong players who they showcase the face of like you would a player's jersey? Does it really matter? There is something uniquely malleable about anime, about something from so far away, devoid of all its cultural context, that allows it to become truly the viewers. Akira Toriyama didn't intend for Dragon Ball to influence decades of African American and Latinx culture, for its characters to cement themselves as small but unequivocal iconography for the community. Eiichiro Oda never thought his silly manga about pirates would pull the type of loyal audience that will argue for years about which character would win in a fight, going to bat for their favorites with unyielding patriotism. And I highly doubt that Koei Horikoshi thought their characters were going to be the Elvis Presley to a certain generation of teenagers. And yes, this isn't what any of these shows are about, and it isn't what their creators wanted those shows to be about. It's a disconnect between them and their audience as big as the distance between their continents. Is this even unique to anime? Or is it just human nature to take from art what we want and nothing more? I like to talk. Hope you like to listen.